Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to see you here tonight. I'm going to talk first. I'm Luann Copeland. I've been a master gardener for 20 years, and I love to grow weird plants, and I have a little bit of everything. So I'm going to talk about some of the plants that I consider weird, and then some of them I grow and some of them I don't grow. So do you want to introduce yourself now?
Oh, I can, or I can introduce myself later. Okay. Hi, I'm Cindy Wiskowitz. I'm the Extension Horticulture Agent for the City of Portsmouth. I have been in Portsmouth for 14, going on 15 years now. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about poisonous plants once Luann is done. So, Stacy, can I share my screen now?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm going to. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, very careful. Okay, we're going to get started. And I'm the good witch, just so you know. I just wanted to make that clear right at the beginning.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so how do I do this? Can I just go down?
Oh, you know what? Do you want to move those boxes out of the way so you can see it, or what?
Well, how do I? Okay.
Should be able to do the most.
Okay. Okay, the first one I think is really a weird plant. It's called a bleeding tooth fungus, Hadnellum peckii. It's really not a plant, but it's a fungus, and it has a symbiotic relationship with roots of another plant. It receives carbon, and then in return, it improves the host plant's mineral absorption. And it only looks like this in the juvenile stage. It's mainly found in the Pacific Northwest, and the caps can be 1 inch up to 4 inches across and 1 inch to 4 inches in height. That's something that I've really never actually seen in person before, but it's pretty gross looking. No, how does that work? Right there.
Is that the next one?
I think you missed one. No, that's the next one. Okay, now we're trying on our technical difficulties here. The next one is the Venus flytrap. And I have seen that plant so many different places. I actually saw it for sale in Aldi's a couple of weeks ago, which is kind of interesting. It's a carnivorous plant. It's native to wetlands in the East Coast in North Carolina and South Carolina. And the insects are attracted to the red interior of the lobes. And once they get in there, the plant devours the insects. It needs plenty of water, needs bright light, and it gets about 1 foot high. Can we do page down?
Okay, just will go.
Okay. Now we're going to have dinner and a movie for everybody. As you can see, this is the Venus flytrap, and this is a poor little ladybug that kind of is attracted to the plant. And she's going to be brave, unfortunately. There she goes. She's now history because it's the plant's going to digest and it'll be gone. Okay, so the next one. Okay, the next plant I'm going to talk about is a pitcher plant. And I've actually grown this one. This is actually a picture of my plant that I had. I don't have it now, kind of bit the dust, how some things last and some things don't. This is also a carnivorous plant, and it's found in different places throughout the world. The pitchers are filled with secretions that attract and digest insects. And that's one of the reasons why I had trouble growing it inside. I had to always keep the pitchers with water inside. It likes partial sun. It gets about 3 feet long, and it's a house plant. And I probably had it at least 5 years or so, and I enjoyed it when I have it. I might want to get it again. Let's see. Okay, pumpkin on a stick. This is something that is really a neat Halloween plant. It's actually an ornamental eggplant. You can eat it, but it has a bitter taste. It's easily grown by seed, and I've grown it by seed the last couple years. It has large purple thorns on the leaves, and it has a green fruit that turns bright orange like little pumpkins in the fall. It likes soil moist and well drained, and it can be 4 feet tall and 3 feet wide. And the one I had this year, you can see this, that's what the little pumpkins look like. And on the leaves is where you have the thorns, and that's easily grown. And I saved the seed from year to year, so I'll have it next year. Okay, the next one is the doll's eye plant. It's native to Eastern North America. It grows about 1.5 to 2 feet tall and 3 feet wide. It'll have white flowers in the spring, but then it gets these weird looking white berries that look like doll's eyes. And I actually saw this plant growing on one of my garden shows that I watched. They had it actually growing in their garden. The berries in the plant are poisonous to humans, so you want to be careful about that. It has toxins which have a sedative effect on the cardiac muscle of people. If you eat the berries, it can lead to cardiac arrest and death. It requires full shade, rich soil, and regular water with good drainage. Bat face cufia, that's one of my favorite plants that I grow. It's an annual plant. You can see, if you look, I hope you can see in the picture the little bat face, because it looks just like a little bat. It blooms the whole season, late spring until frost. It's still blooming now. I picked the sprig before I came, and it's just a wonderful plant that I have to have every year. It likes full sun and adequate water. It gets to be about 2.5 feet tall and wide. It's not real large, and it'll sometimes reseed. It reseeded for me this year because I wasn't able to get out to all my nurseries to buy my special plants. Next one is, I wish that would come off of there. I guess we can get rid of that. Just that thing. See? Yes, because I couldn't read what the title said. This is Indian pipe. I've actually never seen this one in person. It would be an interesting plant to see. It's very scarce. It's native to different parts of the world. It's white because it doesn't have any chlorophyll. It's a parasitic plant. So it gets its nutrients through, it has a beneficial relationship with a fungus in the soil. You have to kind of see it in its natural environment. It flowers from summer to fall and is said to flower after a rain. It's found in dark, shady woods with rich, moist soil, and the stems reach 4 to 10 inches in height. Okay, Dracula orchid. That is native to Central America and the Northwest Andes, and it grows from a rhizome. That would be very difficult to cultivate. It has 120 different varieties and the size varies. That would be something that you really couldn't grow in your house because it has such restrictive conditions, like it needs 70 to 100% humidity, and you have to use distilled or reverse osmosis water, and it likes semi-shade, but it is an interesting plant. Dutchman's pipe. This is one that I grew, and this is actually a picture of the one I had in my yard. That one is native to Brazil. It's an annual variety, so you have to either take it in or get it every year. It has large 12-inch purple mottled blooms over a long period, very large blooms. Heart-shaped leaves are beautiful. It's a vigorous vine. It likes part sun. And there are some hardy varieties of Dutchman's pipe, but the flowers are not as large and it's not as showy. This is Buddha's hand. This is the oldest known citrus in cultivation. It's probably native to the Far East. The fruit is very fragrant, and I think in the old days they used to use it for perfuming rooms and personal items when people really didn't have all the things that we have and didn't take baths very regular. It has large fruit. It has long protruding fingers and thick rind. Fruit is absent of juice and pulp, and the size would be 6 inches to 12 inches. It likes sun, and it's a house plant. And I have seen this one for sale in one of my garden catalogs. Logies. Voodoo lily. This is one that I grow. I've had it for probably at least 10 years or so. It's native to Africa and Asia. It likes the shade. It comes out in the spring with purplish green flowers around a center spike. And the flowers smell like rotting meat. So you don't really want to put it outside your back door. I kind of got it in the backyard further away from the door. And this odor will attract insect pollinators such as flies. Then this flower dies back, and then you get these large finger-like foliage, which is pretty showy. And this is hardy and comes back reliably for me every year. Corpse flower. This is one I've seen for sale in the garden catalog. It's very rare. It'll take up to 7 years to bloom, and it only blooms every 7 to 8 years. And you only have 3 to 5 blooming plants in cultivation each year. It's the tallest compound flower in the world, 7 to 12 feet tall, so it's pretty big. The flowers only open for 48 hours, and it also attracts insects with the smell of rotten flesh. It grows in a rainforest in Western Sumatra and Indonesia. The leaf can grow to 20 feet by 15 feet, and the corm can weigh 120 to 160 pounds. So this would be one you get that nobody else has. So does anybody have any questions about my plants? I like to plant different things, and I like to enjoy those different things in my garden year round. I guess I turn it over to the wicked witch gets it now.
Okay. Oops. Okay, let's talk about poisonous plants. Let me go back here and see. So my talk is basically when I did the initial research and tried to put this together with the focus on, I was getting a lot of questions at the extension office on poisonous plants, particularly pets that are eating plants, if they're poisonous or not, and more so children and grandchildren getting into a lot of people's gardens. So came up with this presentation to just make people more aware of what we have maybe in our gardens every day, that we're not aware of their poisonous properties. That doesn't mean that we can't grow them. It's just that we should be aware of what they do have and what parts are poisonous in case anybody gets into them. We don't want to get into them. Okay, I don't know if you need to see me or not. Okay, so the dose makes the poison. So there are over 700 plants that are toxic to humans and pets, historically used more medicinally. So we start off with a lot of them as medicinal plants, with the proper uses of them as medicinal, but now they can be considered mostly poisonous. Pericles is our scientist that was famous for the words, the dose makes the poison. And this is important because we have to look at how much is ingested and how much a body weight is. So obviously if a child is ingesting something with their body weight of 80 pounds, it's going to be a lot more toxic than if a 200-pound female or male were to ingest the same plant. And also the different parts of the plant. Sometimes the seeds are more poisonous. Sometimes it's the leaf, shoots or stems or the roots that are more poisonous than the actual seeds. So it depends on that. But the dose makes the poison. Could be all substances that are poisons, but it just depends on the person and the body weight. So one of our particular poisons that we have with our story here in Virginia is Jimson weed, which is the Datura, aka Jamestown weed or devil's trumpet. It was added to the food of settlers in 1607 and was responsible for that mass poisoning of the British soldiers in 1676. All parts of this plant are poisonous. It contains a hallucinogenic and contains tropine alkaloids. And alkaloids are a nitrogen organic naturally occurring organic nitrogen, which has diverse and psychological effects on a person. So depending again on how much parts you're taking, it could affect you a little bit different. Some people have very small hallucinogens. Some people get very sick and very ill with it. So there's a picture of what the plant looks like at the bottom, and then the actual prickly seeds up here in the corner. So the symptoms, go back for a minute. The symptoms for that would be like rapid pulse, nervousness, depression. You get dilated pupils, diarrhea, eventually start to have convulsions, and then death, usually if you're consuming a large amount. A couple more famous poison plants that we might hear about in history. Socrates from the poison hemlock, consuming the poison hemlock, and this actually has what they call a cytotoxin, which also leads to abdominal cramps, nausea, and death. And the most parts with this, I believe he ate the leaves and the roots of this. Now, this looks very similar to some of our other plants that we have. Looks like parsley to me in the garden. So you'd have to make sure with this that when you are looking at your plants, you're able to ID them, properly ID them before you decide to eat them as herbs or put them in your food. You need to make sure you know exactly what they are. Usually with the hemlock, it's around wetter sites and swampier areas so that you're more aware of that. This one here, we'll talk about more of the nightshade family in a little bit, but this is deadly nightshade, Atrobelladonna. This is what Macbeth's soldiers used to poison their enemies with, and they were made from the fruits of the nightshade family. Atropine is the toxic chemicals, let's see if I can say this, scopolamine in leaves, berries, and roots on this one. Causes involuntary muscle paralysis, and eventually the heart will just stop altogether. And this last picture down here, if you can see that, that is white snake root. It's related to Ageratum or Argentina, responsible for the death of Abraham Lincoln's mother, Nancy. She thought that was a common plant out in the field, so she was known to kind of bring that in and eat that. And it has a toxic alkaloid again, which causes loss of appetite, nausea, weakness, abdominal comfort, and then eventually a slow death. Okay, some of the other ones that we might be more aware of, which I think is a beautiful ornamental plant and I have growing in my garden, is ricinus, the castor bean plant. I don't know if a lot of people remember as children drinking castor bean oil as a laxative, which it does have very laxative properties with that. And the seed is the source of the castor bean oil, which has a lot of wide variety of uses. The seed contains ricin, water-soluble toxin, present in low concentrations throughout the plant. They use these as a mold deterrent. Lots of times they will do that, but it does have a lethal dose. There's a picture of the seeds there. So for adults, they're thinking adults, 4 to 8 seeds. Now, if you're looking at this in bright red colored, it could be very attractive to children. For that, if they want to, pick the seeds and try to blossoms with that. So you have to be particularly careful with that. Agatha Christie uses this a lot in some of her stories and some of the stories I read for the poison. They'll bake the ricin in pies or, meat pies and that kind of thing. And then their wives are a good way to kill off your husbands with serving of meat pies or in food as far as that goes. It starts off with a burning sensation in your mouth, abdominal pain, purging, bloody diarrhea. It's not one of these that's a very quick death. It's a slow death, so it could be a couple of days before you actually keel over. So not exactly a good way to go. But it does make a nice ornamental plant. This is a red. There's a green and a red leaf variety, and it gets about 8 to 12 feet tall at least. So you can see it in the garden and save the seeds. It's sells seeds readily too. So if you do have this in your garden as an ornamental, I have not seen animals actually get up. Most of the animals know not to chew on these seeds because they are high up in the plant, but they are attractive for, children, grandchildren. So. Okay, a couple other poisonous plants. Luann mentioned the rosemary pea, which is an alkaloid, and then oleander, one of our common shrubs, which I'll mention a little bit again. always has those stories with the poor Boy Scouts where they're going into the woods and they use the branches of the oleander for their hot dog roast, and then they all end up being very sick, or a couple of them have died because of that. And that's just a campfire story that you keep hearing again and again with that. So something to be very careful about if you're using any parts of the plant of the oleander. Okay, I'm going to get into a couple of the families of the plants that we may be aware of, not aware of, that will cause some problems. So in our house plants, these are all in the Ericaceae family. Some of our more common ones, Dieffenbachia, known as dumb cane, Nephthydus, Spathiphyllum, Pothos, Philodendron, Aglaonema, Schefflera. All of these in this, now they're tropical plants, but they all contain calcium oxalate crystals. And what these are, especially with the name called dumb cane, is if you were to chew on the leaves, the actual crystals will cause your throat to swell up and you will not be able to talk, since the name dumb cane, and actually swell and cause your airways to constrict, and you would probably suffocate as far as that goes if you're eating this in large quantities. This is particularly scary if you have puppies or kittens that might want to actually chew on the foliage. Hopefully your children are not, allowed to go around and pick off the leaves and stuff, but accidentally anything can happen. So they could do that if you're ingesting it. Also, by rubbing the leaves or actually getting some of these on, people are very sensitive to the skin irritations, and they can irritate your skin as well, as far as that goes. So be aware of all of that. If you do have animals in your house, these may not be the exact plants that you might want to have around. Moving from houseplants and then into garden plants, our wonderful elephant ears, caladiums, the calocaceas or alocaceas, any ones in those family, again, have needle-like with the calcium oxalate. So again, they would be burning sensations in your mouth, throats, lips as your throat starts to swell, excessive drooling, choking, inability to swallow, and then you can actually suffocate, more or less. For some of them in the calocaceae, it would be similar to the edible plants, is that taro that we have. So this can be, if you're cooking this, you can, with some of the medicinal or poisonous plants, actually, if they are cooked and boiled, you can cook the some of the toxins out of these plants. So you can either soak or ferment or do some of these with that and make them actually more edible. So not necessarily poison with this. In this case, it would be more or less in their storage organs here that would be have the calcium oxalate in it. Still with the house plants, one of our more poisonous plants, which isn't actually a beautiful plant, is our sago palm or the cycads. All parts of this is poisonous, but if you do actually get to harvest the seeds, the toxins are in the seeds, and these are neurotoxins, and there's a certain one, cyocassin, that can cause stomach problems, liver damage, death, and then eventually being a neurotoxin can actually affect your brain system and you're working there. So if you do have this houseplant, you need to be very careful with whoever might be around it and actually might ingest any pieces or parts of it. Going into more of our houseplants, our common English ivy, Dracaena marginata, aloe vera, all have certain amounts of toxin in them. These contain saponins, which are more of the sap in there, and convulsions or an irritant. So not more or less if you're getting a little bit on your skin, might be very sensitive depending on your person, but also if you're ingesting any of it in small amounts or in large quantities. A lot of people actually do take a process like aloe vera juice for their digestion. So you would have to kind of build up a tolerance for that because it can cause stomach upset, diarrhea, that kind of thing. And then we have Kalanchoe or Kalanchoe, depending on where you are from and how you pronounce it, has a cardiac glycoside in there, which speeds up actually your heart rhythms and can cause some heart damage, can make your heartbeat start rapid pulse and almost cause a heart attack. And this can be also a skin irritant too if you're sensitive to this. And the last one, which is a little, move the screen. Can't move that screen up. The ficus or the rubber tree plant also has these irritants in there. So you need to be careful with these if you're having these as houseplants or outdoor plants. Okay, we talked a little bit about the nightshade family. This is the same family that has the potato, tomato, peppers, all of that family that we would normally eat, all have these alkaloids in them. So a lot of them we use as the fruit, and if we're able to cook them, they wouldn't have as much concentrated in that, but a lot of them are also the flowers that we like to grow. We talked about the deadly nightshade has the alkaloids atropine and sclopramine, stems, leaves, berries, and roots. Henbane has another one that has those chemicals in there. Datura, if anybody has, looking at these pictures here, herbaceous plant with these flowers here have the spines on them. They all have that different alkaloids in their leaves and in their stems. So these are very toxic if anybody is going to ingest or swallow on them. A lot of times they have these pretty berries that are black there with that. So it makes it very attractive for your children if they want to come and try to ingest or eat the berries. Brugmansia is another one where all parts of the plant in the same family has these alkaloids in there. If you're a Harry Potter fan and a fan of Mandrake, that screaming plant that they had I'm not sure which Harry Potter movie it was, but one of those also is in the Solanaceae family and has these nightshade or deadly nightshades in there. Symptoms would be dry mouth, diarrhea, migraine, headaches. Ingesting a lot of it can cause paralysis of the muscles, confusion, and then basically some hallucinations, and then ultimately death. So just need to be careful if you do decide to grow these as landscape plants, that you're not going to have anybody chewing on the parts of the stem. Most cases for the edible ones that we eat with the peppers and the tomatoes, you wouldn't have that much of the alkaloids in there with that. So they're okay to do. All right, we're going to move to making some deadly bouquets. So a lot of our flowers that they used actually in medicinal or medieval times is that they would make bouquets, and Victorian times they would send messages with their bouquets. So if you got a bouquet with some of these flowers in there, that meant that your suitor either had an evil message for you or wished you death. So you didn't want to get any bouquets that had certain meanings for all of these. Hopefully you would get something that had a happier sense, but a lot of people would send foxglove. And if anybody has heart conditions, you might be aware of this medicine. They use this digitalis as a medicine for your heart to actually help with its rhythm and get it back in rhythm. So all parts of the foxglove or digitalis is poisonous. It has a glycoside in there. Digoxin is the name of the chemical for that. These make a wonderful addition to the garden as a tall cut flower. So they are very pretty, but you just have to be careful. And again, this would be all parts if you're going to ingest it. So not so much in case of you're rubbing against it, but you'd have to actually ingest it. So cause stomach upset, delirium, convulsions, and then again too much. So they used to use these a lot in the stories. If they knew that you already had heart problems, they would give you some of this to actually make your heart beat some faster or slower, so that you would slowly die. Our hellebores, our Lenten rose, is another one with pretty flowers, and a garden flower that we like to plant. All parts of this are poisonous, so they also have several of those chemicals in there, glycosides, a couple of those alkaloids in there for that. A skin irritant to some people, and this varies if you're handling the plant and the root system. Sometimes people will start to itch. So if you are sensitive to it and you want to plant this, you may need to have gloves as far as that goes. But you can, if you do ingest it, it will start to burn your mouth and you'll have vomiting, dizziness, and convulsions. So a lot of times, and I put this at the end of the class, if you're, or the end of the talk, if you are calling the Poison Control Center, they kind of want to get an idea of what you've ingested and sort of what your symptoms are if your mouth is burning. So if you do have a a child that has possibly eaten stuff, so they can kind of get an idea of what the chemical might be so that they can get to some treatment right away. Lantana is another common one that we have in the garden that all plants, especially the berries too, are toxins. So this certain type of toxin affects your liver. So it will actually start your liver functions and proceed to break down your liver, and then slowly have vomiting, diarrhea, weakness, and then eventually liver failure. So not very good to ingest. Makes a pretty garden plant, but not very good as far as you don't want to eat it. What else do we have on this side? Lobelia is another shade-tolerant plant that we grow. All parts of plants of this have alkaloids in there, which can cause heart problems, vomiting, tremors. Some of these were a couple of groups of the Indians would use lobelia for this. If you had upset stomachs, they would actually give you this so that you could just sort of vomit and throw up. And here again, what they would use as treatments, they know the dose and the quantity, so not giving you too much. It could be the difference between a small amount and a larger amount could be curing what ails you and then also what kills you. So remember that the dose makes the poison and how much you're actually ingesting. And the last one on this slide would be yellow jessamine, would be our vine plant here with the pretty yellow flowers, very poisonous, has alkaloids, those two types of alkaloids, jessamine and glycine, with that. So it can be a skin irritant if you're growing, but if you're touching it, but also depression, tremors, and paralysis eventually. So also toxic to bees from what I understand. So may not be a good garden plant for us, but nice yellow vine. Some more yellow bouquets, larkspur, which again is also I believe in the same family as your delphinium. All parts of this is poisonous, but it makes a very nice cut flower. Has certain alkaloids in there that again can lead to respiratory failure, bloating, and eventually death, related to the delphinium. So here again, pretty cut flower with that. Somebody sends you this bouquet, you may need to question whether or not they wish you well or if they're sending you a message as far as that goes. And our monkshood or our wolfsbane, aconite, is another shade-tolerant plant that we can grow here that is poisonous. So all parts of that is poisonous, especially the root system. So with that causes nausea, vomiting, tingling of the mouth, eventual paralysis, and then death. So lily of the valley, another one of our shade tolerant plants, very pretty, has a very pretty smell on there, but it contains cardiac glycosides, can cause headaches, nausea, and then again will affect your heart muscles and cause it heart muscles to beat up faster so that you can eventually have a heart attack and heart failure and die. And then the last one would be the bleeding hearts, dicentra, and all of those in the families have another type of glycosides. A lot of these that you find have very specific alkaloids to these plants so that you can, when they actually try to figure out which ones make the poison, they're very, very complex, and each one has their own way of, I guess, sort of warding off people from either insects from chewing on them or people to, take them or use them in large quantities. So they're very specific in their poisons. But this one causes respiratory problems if you're going to eat the root system in large quantities, which I wouldn't advise. Okay, so our bulbs and our Liliaceae family, some more of our common ones that are very common around here that we like to plant for that. Tulips, hyacinths, alstroemeria, daffodils are all in this family and are actual true lilies. So tulip bulbs, some people are very sensitive to the bulbs when they're handling it. So it can be a skin irritation, can also cause vomiting, breathing problems. Hyacinths too, people will, after handling the bulbs or planting, have some skin irritants. So I would advise you to try to use gloves if you're going to do that. Same with alstroemeria, Inca lily, it's also called if you're going to do that. And some of our big ornamental allium bulbs, same thing in this, have some things that cause skin irritants for that. So not necessarily more ingesting, but more of a skin irritant. And then we have the daffodils, which are poisonous. So all parts of the daffodil contain a certain toxic licorine, which is an alkaloid. and especially the bulbs. So we can't get the voles to eat this one. We can get the voles to eat our tulips, but we can't get them to eat the poisonous daffodil bulbs. But this would be toxic if anybody did consume any parts of this in the bulb. So it can cause nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, diarrhea. And then our true lilium species. So this would be our Oriental, Asiatic, our Easter lilies, all in that bulb family, are very toxic and have a certain toxins in there that can cause kidney failure and eventually death. And then we have our wonderful, this time of year, our chrysanthemums, which we all know contains pyrethrum, which is an organic insecticide. So they use this obviously to kill insects. So depending on the amounts and the dosage, can also be a skin irritant with that. And you don't want to go around ingesting any of that, but they use it as an organic pesticide or a natural pesticide. Okay, we have autumn crocus, which is culturcum, which all parts of this is toxic. So it does have an alkaloid coltracine, which you can use, will get you burning fever, vomiting, kidney failure. But here again, medicinally, if you're using just a small amounts, they do use this to treat gout. So have to look at some of these plants as whether they're helpful in the certain dose or the certain amount, or too much can actually cause the poison. So you have to be very careful with these. So if anybody grows the autumn crocus, you will. Okay, and we're going to move to some of our other families with the shrubs. This is the dogbane family, or Aponaceae, if I can say that right. We talked about the oleander. So this is the contains the cardiac glycoside. So again, they would affect your heart muscle with that. So these are more common if you're actually going to you have this plant in the landscape, that you might need to make sure that your dogs or your animals, cats, aren't going to go out and start chewing on any of these, because even a small dog or small cat in small amounts can cause serious problems, nausea, vomiting, weakness. And here again, there's that story that they use these branches for the Boy Scouts in their weenie roasts, and they all ended up not alive from what the story goes. And then alamanda and mandevilla, these are ones that we maybe common plants that we grow, viney plants with that. So a lot of the sap in these plants can be an irritant to the skin, causes severe rash. And our milkweeds, anything in the Asclepias family, also contains small amounts of milkweed. So some people are more sensitive when handling milkweed plants. If you rip it off and you see that white latex that sort of comes out of the leaves and the stems, contains a certain amount of alkaloids. So you wouldn't want to chew on that, and you'd want to make sure that your children and grandchildren aren't chewing on it, or your pets. And some people, it may not bother at all, but if you are sensitive to it, may need again to wear gloves to make sure that you're not going to be bothered by it, and wash your hands quickly afterwards. Okay, some of our favorite trees, and one that I grow here, which is great for the birds and great for the wildlife, but is highly poisonous, is our elderberry. Our sambucus, in this case, canadensis or nigra, are the ones that are here, and a native plant. So the leaves, twigs, branches, and seeds all contain trace amounts of cyanide, so cyanide glycosol. With that, which is very deadly. Now you can actually, I didn't mention the fruit. So the fruit and the flowers are not poisonous. And that would be the ones that we use for elderberry liqueur, elderberry wine, elderberry juice or extract that they make the cough syrup out of. With that is from these plants. So you'd have to really know. And here again, be careful when you're IDing that you actually know what parts that you're using so that they are safe and which parts have. As I said, most of the other parts are poisonous, but the flowers that they use in processing for medicines and the fruit, the dried fruits, are what they use for the medicine. It does make a great ornamental plant. So just have to be careful and know what parts you're handling as far as that goes. And our apples, peaches, cherries, all of the seeds in these common fruits also contain small amounts of cyanide. So if you're deciding on chewing on these and you don't really want to chew on the seeds, they do have small amounts of cyanide in them. When I was in graduate school, I had colleague that actually, he was from Brazil, and there they don't waste anything. So they would eat the core, they would eat and chew on the seeds, and they would eat everything. And whereas we normally don't eat the seeds or the core, he would eat everything. And then we were like, but it's poisonous. And he'd like, well, over the years, he would just build up that tolerance to that. So he wouldn't have any problems eating that. But I don't think that's anything that we want to try with that because of these amounts of cyanide in these seeds. So, not a good idea. Okay, this one has a little bit busy slide, but these are some of our more common landscape shrubs that we have that I just want to mention so that you are aware of some of these. Our azaleas and rhododendrons all have toxins, grayotoxins that are contained in the leaves, flowers, pollens, like a glycoside, Andromedas, some of these other, anything in this Ericaceae family, mountain laurels, Pieris, all have these in there. So have to be careful if you're having any animals that are pets or small children that may chew on some of these leaves because it can be very toxic. Picture of a Daphne, our spring flowering Daphne here, very pretty small shrub that you'd have, has an irritating sap, but also has a poisonous glycoside in the berries as well. So another one to be aware of. Our Nandina, our heavenly bamboo that we have, also has trace amounts of cyanide in the leaves with that. So we want to make sure that we're not chewing on that. And the seeds, especially the berries, are very attractive. Birds too have a tendency not to eat it until the last one, but they can, if they're very starved for food, chew on these and have a problem. So very attractive to kids. Our hydrangeas, everybody likes to grow hydrangeas here in the South. So these are another one that if we ingest parts of it can be a problem. These have, again, a glycoside in there and small amounts of cyanide trace. And so anybody's found chewing on these, we can have headaches, muscle weakness, possible vomiting, diarrhea, that kind of thing. And then our yews and our taxus, anything in that family. And I put a picture here so you could look at this, which looks very, very much like a small strawberry or raspberry that might be eaten with that. So that is the actual berry. It actually surrounds the seeds with that, and it's very poisonous. So it has another alkaloid in there. But here again, yews are ones that they process in this genus for some cancer treating drugs. So you'd have to be careful again with the dose. So they do have a lot of medicinal problems, processes, but we need to make sure with that we know what we're doing. So it can cause accelerated heart rate, muscles, tremors, convulsions, can have difficulty breathing when you're ingesting any of those. So make sure, like I said, if you're playing with your kids outside or grandchildren, that you're watching, if you have these shrubs in your yard, watching what they're getting into, especially if you have any new pets, young pets. Okay, we're looking at some of our weeds that are also very attractive that you may not be aware of. This is our famous pokeweed, and these berries are always attractive to kids. And I think if they're playing with them, to look at them because of the purple structures with that. So all parts of these, the roots are the most poisonous, but then leaves, stems, and then as they get older, the toxins actually build up in the system. So children are most likely with this one to be poisoned by the berries because they look at them and use them. We used to do pokeweed salads where you actually took and boiled the new growing things, so somewhat like spinach. So you would actually boil the toxins out of that, and we would just use it as a green with that. And so in that cases, we're all still here. So it didn't kill any of us, but everybody's like, oh, that's poisonous. Well, my grandmother used to, being the medicinal woman that she was, would go out and pick up her pokeweed salad, and we boil them and do that. But this, the berries and the actual sap from the berries is what they would use for some of the Native Americans, and put this on their arrows or on their, to shoot and actually to use the poison for killing with. So it can be very toxic for some of that. And then another one that we see is in our Ipomoea or morning glory family. The seeds of this are also very poisonous and contain hallucinogenic properties with that. A couple of years ago when I was working at the garden center, we would see a rash of all the morning glory seeds just sort of disappear, where the teenagers, and maybe not teenagers, maybe even older, would actually chew on the seeds to try to get some of that, have those hallucinogens in their system and have all those kinds of crazy things. Most of them probably ended up with severe stomach issues, nausea, vomiting from that, but it was not a good fad, but it does occur every now and then where they try to chew on the seeds and to get that high from the seeds. So be careful if you see any of that happening. Okay, and then we have our cashew family, and this family, I put this in here because hopefully not ingesting this, but just because so many people are very sensitive to poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac. It has that irritating oil, urushiol, which is a lot of people are highly allergic to. And I have some friends that can walk through the poison ivy and not have a problem at all. I am not one of those people. I am highly allergic to poison ivy, and I can just look at it and I start itching. So just need to be very aware of that and make sure leaves of 3, let it be. That's what we always learned as children for that. So it can take several days for the rash to appear because the oil is very persistent and will stay on your stomach, stay on your skin with that. I had a professor when I was in college that actually was, they didn't realize their neighbors were actually burning trees and had poison ivy in there. The smoke got into his respiratory system and into his eyes, and it was not, he was very seriously in the hospital for a long time because of that. So you have to be very careful with, if you have it on trees and you cut down trees and plan on burning the wood as well. So you need to be, make sure that this is not happening with that. Can also stay on clothing and pet fur for a while. So if you have any animals that are running around with that and then you're rubbing or, petting your animals can cause a lot of problems. In this family, and some people also have problems with these or allergic reactions to cashews, which are in this, or mangoes. And if you're eating fresh mangoes, you may get blisters with that. So just be aware of that. Let's see what else I have. Okay, coming up to the holiday plants, my holiday warning with our poinsettias poisonous. Yes and no. A lot of the everybody asks with them because they're holiday plants. They do have the latex can be an irritant. If you break it off, most adults, you'd have to eat an awful lot of it to be poisonous. But here again, if you have animals chewing on it, young children that, like the red and doing that, if you break it off, you'd see that latex in there. So it can be a stomach irritant or a skin irritant. So need to be careful with that. Our famous mistletoe for that special kiss at the holiday time. The berries at this plant also contain alkaloids, so can be poisonous if you have anybody ingesting that. Can cause, again, stomach irritation, vomiting, diarrhea, a lot of abdominal pain. And our holly berries also contain a certain type of alkaloids with that can cause vomiting and diarrhea. And here again, they use some of the hollies, and Native Americans use the hollies for stomach problems. So if you had any problems with that, they would give it to you on purpose to actually cause you vomiting and diarrhea. So here again, you have to know what you're looking at. Okay. I don't know if anybody wants to take a guess with this, but put in there if anybody has any idea of what the most toxic plant might be. I know you're all muted. Does anybody want to give me a guess? Anybody still out there? Is anybody still listening?
Is it water hemlock?
That's a good guess, but no. Anybody else?
Blue-green algae.
Oh, that's an interesting one. No.
Deadly nightshade?
That would be close.
What about the castor bean?
Castor bean, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Castor beans.
Okay, no. Anybody else? You're all ready for this?
Monkhood?
It is tobacco. Okay, and being the reason that it is most widely grown commercial plant with that, and extremely highly addicting. So not so much because we are ingesting it more so, but because of the toxins that we're taking into our lungs. So this is actually an alkaloid with nicotine in there, and can be fatal if it's eating. They usually have this as a natural insecticide too. So you can use this for killing all your plants with that, but it can cause skin irritation, stomach cramps, difficult breathing, weakness, and death. So it is a cardiac poison. So it is because it's considered the most widely consumed plant around the world, and both psychoactive and addicting, and the amount of deaths that it actually causes a year. It is considered probably one of the more deadly plants for poisonous plants.
What about vaping?
Vaping with that would depend on the percentage of nicotine that would actually be in those. I don't know much about what the percentage is, but that would be, sort of the same thing. I mean, you're ingesting that similar nicotine product into your lungs. So, but I'd have to know the actual percentage with that. So here again, the ones that it is most attractive to are the, younger lungs, which it would take up more interesting to. It's a big craze now with some of the younger people. So very good one. And then I have listed here, just so that if you do have any problems with any of these plants, some of the, where I got my research with the Animal Emergency Hotline, Poison Control, ASPC has a great list of the poisonous plants, in case you're curious, of ones that I tried to mention, several of them, but more of the common ones that we use in our landscape here. There is a pet poison helpline that you can use. That will give you some more information on some of these. Best thing to do is, if you do suspect it, call 911, call the Poison Control Center, and try to get an idea of what the plant is, if it is ingested, so that they can get you the right kind of treatment. That is the end of my presentation. Does anybody have any specific questions for?
We do have some questions from the chat.
Okay.
This question was for Luann, for where she purchases her plants.
I like to get my weird plants from Logie's, which is a nursery in Connecticut. And also Big Bloomers is a really good source in Sanford, North Carolina.
Okay, next question. Why do my tall North American pitchers fall over? Is it just that the pitchers themselves are old and too big?
Probably.
I know there were a few more. All right. Can someone list plants that are particularly dangerous to cats?
On that pet poison helpline, they will specifically list dogs and cats. So I think that you can actually do the ones that are more, because some of them are more sensitive to dogs than our cats with that. So the pet poison helpline breaks that down between species. So that would be the best way to go.
Okay.
Better ones.
And are there plants that we shouldn't even touch?
I would touch poison ivy.
Really?
As far as that goes.
Number one on my list.
I think my word with here is that not so much touching, is that you need to be aware of what you're planting. Obviously, you'd have to consume, for us as adults, in large amounts and large quantities. So I say a lot of them are beautiful landscape plants. So as long as we're knowledgeable and aware of what they can be, if something goes wrong, if you're planting something that you like, and all of a sudden you start to break out in hives or skin irritations, might have you take a second look. But as far as not planting anything, I don't know if there'd be one that would be so deadly that we would tell you not to. Like I said, I would be more wary of the poison ivies, just because of the skin irritation factor on that.
Can you specify which parts of the fig tree to avoid?
That would be more or less in the leaves and the root system for the houseplant. And that needs to be chewed. Chewed, and the latex is in the leaves. Yeah.
I think that she's referring to like the hardy fruiting varieties.
Okay, this ficus would be the ficus indoor plant. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That was in the houseplant slide, so that would be the indoor little ficus or like the bigger leaf ficus, but they're indoor houseplants.
I meant the trees, the fig trees.
Yeah, no, that is not part of that. That's different genus, different plant. Not aware of that being poisonous to my knowledge. Yeah, because we eat the fruit a lot. That did not appear on any of my lists.
Okay, and then Mike Bain had a question. What about touching most dangerous? The Native American Cherokees used the fly trap for a fishing ritual. Mike might need to clarify that question a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that plant fishing ritual. A plant toxin from a certain plant or?
I'm not sure. And then I think this is the last one in the chat. Does picking lily of the valley put poison on the skin?
It can if you get the sap from the stems, yes. So that might be where you might need some gloves if you're sensitive to that.
Okay. And then do you have a plant list that we can post for people?
I sent something to Miss Sherry Kern.
Okay.
Some, not all of them. That's why I made this one with the slides too, because it has some more or less landscape ones. Before more complete ones, you probably need to look at some of these websites.
Okay.
I did have one thing that you could post.
And then do most of these plants have to be eaten to be poisonous?
The ones that I mentioned, yes. Ingested. There are the ones that I mentioned that were skin irritants more so, but the other ones are ingested.
All right. The questions keep coming in. So does burning mimosa tree leaves cause deadly fumes?
Not aware of anything within mimosa that's toxic, so not sure on that one. The only one I'm aware of with the leaves would be the poison ivy if you're burning, so not aware of anything with mimosa.